All right, we're diving into a pretty shadowy world today, a place where national security and private companies are starting to look a lot alike. And the result? You get a new kind of weapon, sold by a company called Paragon. We're talking about one of the most sophisticated digital surveillance tools out there, basically an invisible weapon for hire. Just imagine for a second what that feels like. These are the words of an Italian journalist, Francesco Cancellato, and they really cut to the heart of what's at stake here. You know, this isn't just about stolen data. It's about that deep personal violation of knowing your most private world has been secretly torn wide open. So, the big question is, how on earth is this even possible? I mean, forget everything you think you know about getting hacked. No suspicious links, no fake attachments. We are talking about a technology that can completely take over your phone without you doing a single thing. So let's break down exactly how this works.
Okay, let's start with the technology itself. This is where we need to unpack the concept of zero-click spyware, because it's the engine that powers this entire secretive industry.
You know, a zero-click exploit is, well, it's pretty much what it says on the tin. It's like a ghost in the machine. It works completely behind the scenes, finding tiny, invisible vulnerabilities in the apps you use every single day. A specially designed message, or maybe even just a missed call, can be all it takes to give an attacker full access, long before you even see a notification.
So how does it actually play out? Well, the whole process is just incredibly slick and frankly a little terrifying. First, an operator picks a target. Then the exploit, that invisible weapon, is delivered, usually through a common app like WhatsApp or iMessage. Now here's the crazy part. Without you doing anything, the code executes silently and gets a foothold on your device. And from that moment on, it starts siphoning off your private data, all without leaving a trace.
So what can this spyware, which is called graphite, actually do? The power it has is just staggering. It can read your encrypted messages on apps like Signal or WhatsApp. How? Well, it grabs them right off your device after they're decrypted. It can turn your phone into a live microphone and camera, basically a bug in your pocket. It tracks your location in real time, and yeah, it works on the latest iPhones and Androids. This is not science fiction. This is real.
You know, a weapon this powerful doesn't just materialize out of thin air, right? So who created it? Well, that brings us to the company behind the code, Paragon Solutions.
Paragon's journey is just wild. It shows this incredible speed and a really clear strategy. Get this, it was founded in 2019 by veterans from Israel's elite intelligence unit. But here's the pivot. By 2024, it's snapped up by a U.S. private equity firm for $500 million, with plans to merge into the American defense industry. This wasn't an accident. It was a calculated move to transform from a foreign startup into a U.S.-owned defense contractor.
And this is where you see the two faces of Paragon. And it's a huge contradiction. On one hand, you have the public image. They claim they only sell to democracies, that they have zero tolerance for misuse, and that they're the ethical choice. But then you look at the reality uncovered by researchers, and you see a different story. No transparency, no public record of cutting off bad actors, and hard forensic evidence linking their tool directly to the targeting of journalists. It's this gap that's at the heart of the whole controversy.
Okay, so we've talked about the tech, we've talked about the company, but let's shift gears and talk about what really matters, the human cost. What is the real-world impact of a weapon like graphite?
37. Just let that number sink in for a moment. And remember, that's not some global total. That's the number of journalists confirmed to have been targeted in a single democratic country, Italy. It just goes to show you the potential scale of this kind of abuse.
And take a look at who these targets are. They're not just random people. They are investigative journalists, leaders of NGOs, opposition politicians, academics, and lawyers. In other words, these are the very people who act as the checks and balances in a healthy society. This pattern strongly suggests a campaign aimed at monitoring and maybe even silencing critical voices.
And we come back to Francesco Cancellato, who's not just a target, but also the editor-in-chief of a major Italian news outlet. His words here, they're not just a personal complaint. He's sounding the alarm, warning that this technology poses a massive threat to a free press, which, as we know, is a cornerstone of any real democracy.
But it's not all one-sided. There's a counter-offensive, and it's coming from some of the biggest names in tech. Apple is actively sending out threat notifications to users they believe are being targeted. And Meta, which owns WhatsApp, isn't just warning people. They're actually taking these spyware companies to court. It has become this high-stakes, technical, and legal arms race.
And all of this really brings us to the core of the issue, right? It's that classic, incredibly difficult debate, security versus privacy.
On one side, you have law enforcement making the argument that with everything being encrypted these days, they absolutely need tools like this to catch terrorists and other serious criminals. But on the other side, you have civil society groups pointing to the mountain of evidence of abuse, saying these tools create a chilling effect on free speech. There are no easy answers here, just a very high-stakes balancing act.
This is a perfect example of just how tricky policy can be and how easily it can get outmaneuvered. The White House issued an order to restrict the use of foreign commercial spyware. But after Paragon was bought by a U.S. firm, a multi-million-dollar government contract with them was reinstated. Why? Because the tech was suddenly reclassified as domestic. It's a massive loophole that shows how a change in corporate ownership can completely change the rules of the game.
So, where does all this leave us? What does the fight for our own privacy look like going forward, and what do the experts say needs to happen next?
So when you talk to digital rights advocates, a few key ideas keep coming up. First, we need to demand real transparency from governments about what tools they're buying and why. Second, we need to support the tech companies and independent researchers who are building the defenses against these attacks. And third, on a much more fundamental level, we have to uphold human rights and recognize that digital freedom is absolutely essential for democracy to work.
And that really leaves us with a final, massive question. A question we all have to think about. In an age of truly invisible weapons, what is the real price of security? And maybe more importantly, who gets to decide what that price is?